The wind howled across the sharp peaks of the mountains, carrying cold snow and dust with every gust. A small human boy, no more than 12 years old, walked alone on the narrow path, his clothes torn and his feet wrapped in thin fabric. He had no family, no home, only his will to survive. The mountains were cruel, but he had learned to live with hunger, fear, and loneliness. He carried a small bundle on his back. Inside were scraps of dry bread and a blanket patched with holes. Each step was heavy, but he kept moving, his eyes scanning the ground for berries or roots. The boy knew danger was everywhere, wild animals, falling rocks, and sometimes even stranger things. But that day he saw something that made him freeze in shock. At the bend of the path, half hidden under snow, lay a figure. Her skin was pale blue, glowing faintly under the dim light. Her silver hair spread across the cold stones, and her body shook with weakness. The boy's heart raced. He had never seen such a creature before. He had heard stories of aliens, travelers from other worlds, but to find one dying here in the mountains, it felt unreal. For a moment, fear held him still. What if she was dangerous? What if others like her were nearby? What if helping her would bring death? But then he saw her eyes slowly open, large and bright, filled with pain. She tried to move, but her body gave out, her hand reaching weakly toward him before falling back. The boy's chest tightened. He remembered when he was small, sick and cold, reaching for help no one gave. His lonely heart whispered the choice before his mind did. He stepped closer, kneeling beside her. "Can you hear me?" he asked, his voice shaking. Her lips parted, a faint sound came, not in his language but filled with desperation. He didn't understand her words, but he understood her meaning. She was begging to live. The boy slipped his arms under her shoulders and tried to lift. Her body was light, but his strength was small. He stumbled, his knees scraping against stone. Still, he pulled, dragging her toward the small cave he had passed earlier. Every step hurt, every breath burned, but he didn't stop. Snow fell harder, covering their trail, while shadows moved on the distant cliffs. Inside the cave, the boy laid her down on the ground, wrapping her with his torn blanket. Her skin felt cold, too cold, and her breathing came in shallow gasps. He quickly lit a small fire with dry sticks he carried. The flame flickered weakly but gave some warmth. The girl's eyes opened again, staring at him with something he could not name. Fear, hope, maybe even trust. He gave her a piece of his dry bread, breaking it gently and placing it near her lips. At first she didn't move, then slowly, she chewed, as if tasting food for the first time in days. The boy smiled faintly, though his own stomach twisted with hunger. He had so little, yet he gave it away without regret. The cave grew quiet. The only sound was the crackling fire and the girl's weak breaths. Outside, the storm screamed, but inside, a strange calm filled the air. The boy sat close to her, his eyes heavy with exhaustion, but his mind alert. He did not know who she was, where she came from, or why she was here. But he knew one thing. He could not leave her to die. As sleep pulled at his eyes, he thought of tomorrow. Would she be stronger, or would she fade away? Would someone come searching for her? And if they did, would they be friend or foe? The boy had no answers, only questions, but deep inside he felt that his life had just changed. The mountains no longer felt empty. For the first time, he was not alone. And far above, hidden by the storm clouds, the hum of alien engines echoed faintly. The boy did not hear it, but it was there, a shadow moving closer. The act of kindness he had shown tonight would not be forgotten, nor would it go unchallenged. The first light of dawn broke through the mountain storm, painting the snow in pale gold. The boy stirred awake, his body aching from the cold floor of the cave. Beside him, the alien girl still breathed, faint but steady, wrapped in his old blanket. He blinked and rubbed his eyes, wondering for a moment if she had only been a dream. But the soft glow of her skin told him she was real, more real than anything in his lonely life. He leaned closer, whispering, "You're still alive," though he knew she could not understand his words. Her silver eyes opened halfway, tired but aware. She tried to sit, but pain made her fall back, her hand pressing against her ribs. The boy quickly held her shoulders, shaking his head. "No, don't move. Not yet." His voice was gentle. She watched him silently, her gaze sharp, like she was studying him. Outside, the storm had slowed, but the wind carried an uneasy sound. Somewhere far, an echo of engines rumbled, hidden beneath the howl of nature. The boy did not hear it clearly, but the girl did. Her ears twitched slightly, her face turning toward the distance. Fear flashed across her eyes, but she hid it quickly. The boy helped her sip melted snow from a tin cup. Each drop gave her a little more strength, though her body still trembled. When he offered her another piece of bread, she pushed it back toward him. Her lips moved, forming a word he did not know. But he understood the meaning. She wanted him to eat. The boy shook his head, smiling faintly, breaking the piece in two and sharing it anyway. For the first time, the alien girl smiled back, a small but shining smile. Hours passed, and the girl tried again to rise. This time she stood, her legs shaking, leaning on the cave wall. The boy moved beside her, offering his shoulder. She took it without hesitation, her blue hand resting against his thin frame. Together, step by step, they left the cave, facing the long path of the mountains. The world outside was vast and cruel. Snow stretched endlessly, cliffs rose like walls, and sharp winds clawed at them. The boy led carefully, guiding her along the narrow trail. He showed her where the rocks were safe to step, where the snow hid deep holes. Though her body was weak, she followed, her trust growing with every step. As they walked, she spoke in her language, soft words he could not grasp. But her tone carried stories, sorrow, loss, and a plea for survival. The boy listened, nodding even when he did not understand. In return, he spoke of his own life. How he had no parents, no one to call family. How he survived on scraps, wandering from place to place. His voice cracked when he spoke of nights spent alone. And though she could not know his words, she felt his loneliness. Her eyes softened, a silent bond forming between them. By afternoon, the path grew harsher, the mountains rising steeper. Their shadows stretched long, covering the trail. The boy paused often to let her rest, offering his small strength to steady her. Yet even as they moved, strange signs appeared. Large marks in the snow, too wide for any animal, and broken branches as though something heavy had passed through. The boy felt a chill deeper than the cold. They were not alone. That night, they found shelter under an overhang of rocks. The boy built another fire, while the girl sat close, her hands trembling near the flames. She looked at him, then touched her chest, speaking her name slowly. "Sail," she said, her voice weak but clear. The boy blinked, then touched his own chest. "Aaron," he answered, his first gift of trust. She repeated it, her voice softer, almost warm. "Aaron." For the first time in years, he felt less like a shadow wandering the world. For the first time, someone had spoken his name with care. But as the fire flickered, Sail's eyes darted toward the mountain ridge. Her body tensed, ears sharp. She whispered a word, her tone heavy with fear. Aaron followed her gaze and froze. In the distance, faint against the snow, dark shapes moved along the ridge. At least a dozen, maybe more. Figures with weapons and armor that glinted in the pale moonlight. The alien raiders had found their trail. The boy's heart pounded. Sail gripped his arm tightly, her body shaking. Whatever little piece they had found was gone. The mountains would no longer hide them. The storm that followed would be far deadlier than the cold. And high above, 30 ships circled silently in the clouds, waiting for the signal to strike. The night was silent except for the crackle of the fire, but both Aaron and Sail could not sleep. The shadows on the ridge still haunted their minds, dark figures that vanished into the storm. Aaron's young hands gripped a broken stick, as if it were a sword. He knew it was useless against real weapons, yet holding it gave him courage. Sail sat close to the fire, her silver hair glowing faintly under the flame. Her eyes looked far away, lost in memory, her lips trembling as if words fought to escape. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. "Raiders," she whispered, her accent rough but understandable. Aaron's head turned sharply. He did not know how she spoke his tongue, but the meaning was clear. She pointed to her chest, then to the mountains. "My people, hunted," she said slowly. Her voice cracked, and she lowered her gaze. "They want me." Aaron felt a knot in his stomach. So it was true. She was not just some traveler, she was prey. The raiders were searching for her, and now, because he had helped her, they would search for him too. But when he looked at her pale, tired face, he felt no regret. Instead, he felt anger. Why would 30 armed warriors chase one broken girl? Sail reached toward the fire, her hand shaking. A small light appeared at her fingertips, glowing faintly like a spark of energy. Aaron's eyes widened, his breath caught in his throat. She quickly pulled her hand back, hiding it in her lap. Power, she whispered, they take it. The boy stared at her, confused but amazed. She was no ordinary alien. She carried something inside her, something the raiders wanted. Her body was weak, but within her was a light they feared and desired. He could not understand all of it, but he knew one thing. Her life was worth far more than his. And yet, he was the one guarding her, a starving orphan with nothing but courage. Outside, the wind grew louder, carrying faint echoes of voices. Aaron's heart pounded. He thought he heard laughter, cruel and sharp, drifting across the cliffs. He quickly threw dirt over the fire, plunging them into darkness. The cave became silent. Only their breaths filled the air. Sail's hand gripped his arm, her touch trembling but firm. Together, they waited, listening. The voices faded, but the fear did not. Hours later, when the storm quieted, Aaron risked a look outside. The snow reflected the pale moon, and in the distance, strange lights moved in formation. Small hovercrafts gliding silently over the ridges, scanning the ground like predators. He pulled back inside, whispering, "They're searching for you." Sail nodded, her face pale. "They always search, never stop," she said, her eyes wet with sorrow. That night, neither spoke again, but both understood. Time was short. At dawn, they left the cave, their bodies weak but their steps urgent. The path twisted higher, cliffs rising like jagged teeth on both sides. Sail leaned on him often, her strength fading, but her will unbroken. Aaron felt his small body ache under her weight, but he never let go. By midday, they stopped near a frozen stream. Aaron broke the ice with a rock, giving her water to drink. As she rested, she looked at him, her lips forming words carefully. "Why help me?" she asked slowly, each word heavy with effort. Aaron paused, staring at the white ground. He thought of nights alone, of reaching for hands that never came. He thought of his hunger, his pain, his tears that no one saw. Finally, he whispered, "Because no one helped me." Sail's eyes filled with something beyond gratitude, something he could not name. For the first time, she touched his cheek gently, her blue fingers warm against his skin. "Human, strong," she whispered, almost like a vow. Before he could answer, the air shook with a deep hum. The snow on the trees fell as a massive shadow crossed above. A raider ship hovered low, its dark metal body glowing with red lights. Aaron's blood ran cold. His hand instinctively grabbed hers. They ducked under the frozen bank as the ship passed slowly overhead. From its underside, beams of red light scanned the ground, cutting across the snow. The search was no longer far away. It was here. The boy held his breath, his heart hammering against his ribs. The beam came closer, sweeping across the trees, the rocks, the frozen stream. Then it stopped, pausing as if it had sensed something. Aaron tightened his grip on Sail, ready to run though he knew they could never outrun machines. Suddenly, a sharp whistle rang out from the cliffs. Another raider voice, shouting commands in their alien tongue. The ship turned toward the sound, drifting away slowly. Aaron exhaled, his body shaking from the tension. Sail whispered in fear, "They know they near." Her words were broken, but the meaning was clear. The raiders had not just been searching blindly, they were closing in. Aaron looked at her and knew their time was running out. If they kept climbing the mountains, they would be trapped. But turning back meant falling straight into the raiders' hands. The boy clenched his jaw, his young face hard with determination. He had survived hunger, storms, and loneliness all his life. Now he had someone beside him, someone who needed him. For the first time, he was not just surviving, he was protecting. And far behind them, on the snowy ridge, 30 raiders stood together. Their leader raised a long blade, pointing toward the boy and the alien girl's trail. His voice roared through the mountains. "Find them." The mountains stretched endlessly, their white peaks cutting into the sky like jagged blades. Aaron and Sail moved slowly, their footprints trailing behind them in the deep snow. The boy's legs ached, his breath coming out in heavy clouds. yet he kept walking. Beside him, Sail leaned heavily on his shoulder, her glowing eyes fixed on the path ahead. Every step was a fight against the cold, the hunger, and the fear that stalked them. By midday, the clouds broke, and the sun lit the valley below. Aaron froze when he saw smoke rising in the distance, dark plumes twisting into the sky like warnings. Sail's face paled, her lips trembling. "Raiders," she whispered. Her voice was almost broken, as if the word itself carried pain. Aaron stared at the smoke, his fists tightening. He wanted to turn away, to find another path, but the mountains offered no choice. The trail narrowed, leading them straight toward the valley. They could only go forward or give up and fall into the snow. As they descended, the sound of engines grew louder. Harsh mechanical roars echoed between the cliffs, bouncing from stone to stone. Aaron's chest tightened. He pulled Sail behind a ridge, peeking over the edge. His heart nearly stopped. Across the valley, 30 alien raiders moved in formation. Some rode hoverbikes that glided over the snow, their engines growling like predators. Others marched in heavy armor, their weapons glowing with red energy. At their center stood a tall figure, their leader, his armor black and marked with scars of old battles. He carried a long blade that pulsed with light, a weapon both ancient and alive. Sail's grip on Aaron's arm tightened until it hurt. Her voice shook. "Leader, he come." Aaron looked at her, then back at the raiders. His body trembled, not from the cold, but from the impossible truth. How could a starving orphan boy stand against 30 warriors trained for war? The raiders spread out, their eyes scanning the cliffs, their voices barking commands. They were hunting like wolves closing in on prey. Aaron ducked low, pressing Sail against the rocks. "We need to move," he whispered, though his voice cracked with fear. Sail nodded, but her body was weak, her steps slow. They crawled along the ridge, every sound of falling snow making Aaron flinch. Every breath felt too loud, every movement too heavy. But then, a shout cut through the air. One of the raiders pointed, raising his weapon, the glow of his visor fixed on their position. "Run," Aaron shouted, pulling Sail with all his strength. The girls stumbled but followed, their bodies sliding down the slope into the deeper snow. Bolts of red energy seared past them, exploding against rocks. The mountain echoed with fire and light as the raiders opened the hunt. Aaron's lungs burned, his legs screamed with pain, but he did not stop. He pulled Sail into a cluster of boulders, shielding her as blasts struck around them. The ground shook, snow falling in heavy sheets. Sail looked at him, her face pale but her eyes fierce. "They never stop," she said, "until I taken." Her words stabbed at him. Aaron clenched his teeth, shaking his head. "They won't take you," he said, his voice rough, his body trembling with fear but also with fire. For the first time, the boy who had nothing spoke like someone who had everything to lose. The raiders' leader raised his blade, pointing straight at the rocks where they hid. His voice thundered through the valley. "Bring the girl alive, kill the human." Aaron's heart hammered, his hand gripping the broken stick he still carried. It was useless, just wood, but in that moment, it felt like steel. He thought of all the nights he had been forgotten, all the times he had been left alone. No one had ever come for him. No one had ever stood between him and the world's cruelty. But now, someone needed him, and he would not break. Snow swirled around them as the raiders advanced. The ground trembled under the weight of their engines. The air burned with the heat of their weapons. Aaron stood in front of Sail, his small body a shield against the storm. His voice cracked, but did not falter. "You'll have to go through me." Sail gasped, her eyes wide, her lips trembling as if she wanted to stop him. But she saw the fire in his eyes and knew it was too late. The boy was no longer just a starving orphan. In that moment, he was something more, something the raiders did not expect. A human who refused to bow. Snow fell in thick waves as the mountain pass opened wide. Aaron's breath steamed in the freezing air while Sail leaned on him, her steps slow but determined. They had climbed for hours, hoping to lose the shadows that followed, but fate had other plans. When they reached the ridge, they stopped in shock. 30 alien raiders waited for them, their dark armor glowing with red symbols, their hover bikes lined like wolves ready to strike. The sound of engines filled the valley, vibrating through stone and snow. At the center stood the leader, taller than the rest, with a cruel face and a blade that shimmered under the pale sun. His voice roared, echoing across the cliffs. "Give us the girl, human, and we may let you live." Sail's body shook beside Aaron, her hand clutching his sleeve. Her eyes burned with fear, but also shame. She whispered, "They want me. Only me." Her voice carried the weight of despair. But Aaron's small fists clenched tighter around the broken stick he carried. He knew it was no weapon, yet his heart refused to bend. He stepped in front of her, his thin frame standing against the storm of raiders. "No," he said, his voice clear, though his knees trembled. The leader laughed, a deep, cruel sound that spread among the raiders like fire. "Human boy," the leader sneered. "You are nothing, weak, starving, alone." He raised his blade toward Aaron. "You think to fight us with that stick?" Aaron's chest rose with each breath, his body small, but his spirit unshaken. He lifted the stick like a sword, his eyes burning with defiance. "I won't let you take her," he said, his voice stronger this time. For a moment, silence filled the air, broken only by the wind. The raiders shifted uneasily, some muttering, others smirking. But all of them felt something strange, a boy too fragile to fight, yet standing as if he carried an army behind him. Sail's heart pounded, her throat tight with emotion. She had seen warriors fall to the raiders' blades, seen soldiers beg for mercy, but never had she seen a child refuse them. Never had she seen such stubborn fire. Her eyes glistened as she whispered his name. "Aaron." The leader raised his hand, and the raiders pulled their weapons. Blades hummed with energy, rifles glowed, and engines roared louder. The air shook with the promise of violence. Sail gripped Aaron's shoulder, whispering, "Run, please, leave me." But Aaron shook his head, never looking back. "I won't," he said simply. The leader growled, "Then die with her." He lowered his blade, giving the signal to strike. Engines screamed as raiders pushed forward, snow blasting from their hoverbikes. The ground shook beneath their charge. Aaron's grip tightened, his body braced for the end. But then, the mountain itself groaned. A low thunder rolled beneath their feet, cracks spreading across the icy ground. From the cliffs above, large stones tumbled, crashing into the path of the charging raiders. One bike swerved, another was crushed under falling rock. The raiders shouted in anger and confusion. Aaron blinked, stunned. He had not moved, yet the mountain had answered. Sail's eyes widened, glowing faintly in the storm light. Her trembling hands pressed against the air as if calling something unseen. Her voice shook. "The mountain, it wakes." The raiders halted, unsure, some glancing upward nervously. But their leader roared, "Do not fear rocks, take the girl." Aaron stepped forward again, placing himself between Sail and the wall of warriors. His stick trembled in his hand, but his voice carried louder than the storm. "You'll have to go through me first." The raiders laughed again, yet some did not. They looked at the boy and felt a strange weight in his words. Not because of the stick, not because of his strength, but because his spirit was unbreakable, and deep inside, they feared what that meant. The leader snarled and motioned for his men to move. But before they could strike, the ground split with a deafening crack. From the fissures rose strange machines buried in stone, ancient guardians of the mountains. Their eyes glowed blue, their metal bodies towering. The raiders froze, their laughter silenced. Even their leader stepped back in shock. Sail gasped, whispering, "Protectors they answer." Her power had awakened them, but it was Aaron's defiance that gave them purpose. The boy stood tall, his stick still raised. For the first time, the raiders felt doubt. They had come for an easy hunt, but found a child who dared to defy them. And now the mountains themselves had risen in his defense. The leader gritted his teeth, his voice dripping with rage. "This is not over, human," he roared. Snow whirled around him as his army regrouped. But Aaron did not lower his stick, his voice steady. "It will never be over, not while I'm standing." The ground shook as the ancient machines rose from the cracks. Stone fell away from their bodies, revealing glowing cores and armor carved with forgotten marks. Their eyes burned with blue fire, their limbs heavy like mountains themselves. Each step they took made the earth tremble, sending echoes down the valley. The raiders froze in shock, their hoverbikes sliding to a halt. One shouted in fear, "Ancient guardians," his voice breaking. Another raised his weapon, but his hands shook. Even their leader narrowed his eyes, his grip on his blade tightening. Aaron stood still, his chest heaving with fear and courage mixed together. He had no idea what these giants were, but he knew one thing. They were not here by chance. They had answered something. Maybe Sale's strange power, maybe his own stubborn refusal to bend. Sale's weak body glowed faintly, her silver hair lifted by an unseen force. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Protectors, bound to my people. But they listen to you too." The leader of the raiders roared, breaking the fear in his men. "Do not cower. They are machines of stone and rust. We are warriors." He raised his blade high, its red edge glowing. "Destroy them, and take the girl." Engines screamed as the raiders charged forward, weapons flashing in the stormlight. Energy bolts streaked across the snow, striking the guardians with bursts of fire. But the ancient machines did not fall. They moved slowly but with unstoppable power. One raised its massive arm and swung, smashing 3 bikes into the cliffs in a single strike. Another opened its chest, releasing a beam of pure blue energy that cut through the snow like lightning. The raiders scattered, shouting in rage and fear. Aaron pulled Sale behind a boulder, shielding her with his small frame as blasts struck nearby. The mountain shook with battle, fire and snow mixing into chaos. He peeked out, his stick still clutched in his hand though it was useless. He saw warriors crushed, machines burning, and above it all, the leader cutting through stone like it was nothing. Sale's voice broke through the noise, weak but urgent. "Aaron, you must run." Her silver eyes met his, full of sorrow. "They want me. If I stay, you die." But Aaron shook his head, his face hard despite his young years. "No, we leave together," he said, his voice steady. She looked at him, her lips trembling. "You are only a boy." "And still," he whispered, "I will fight." The leader's roar echoed again as he leapt onto the back of a broken guardian. With one swing, his blade carved into its chest, splitting stone and metal apart. The machine collapsed, shaking the earth with its fall. Snow burst into the air, blinding everyone for a moment. The raiders cheered, their courage returning. "See," the leader shouted, "they are not gods, only relics. Kill them all." But even as the guardians fell, more rose from the mountainside, their forms emerging like living statues, their glowing eyes piercing through the storm. The valley became a battlefield of ancient power and modern steel. Blades clashed, beams tore through the night, and screams echoed across the cliffs. Aaron's heart pounded, his small hands trembling. But he stood, pulling Sale with him. He shouted above the noise, "Come on, we move now." She stumbled, but his grip held firm. They ran along the edge of the battlefield, the snow crunching beneath their feet. Explosions shook the ground, forcing them to dive behind rocks and fallen trees. Each step felt like the last, but still they ran. As they climbed higher, Aaron looked back. He saw one guardian fall, pierced by dozens of raider blasts. But even in its final moment, it reached out and crushed another group of enemies beneath its weight. The mountains bled fire, but they did not yield. Then Aaron saw him, the leader, his eyes glowing red under his helmet. Their gazes met across the chaos. The leader pointed his blade directly at the boy. "You cannot run, human," he roared, his voice echoing like thunder. "I will take what is mine, even if I must burn these mountains to ash." Aaron felt fear crash over him like a wave, but he did not stop. He pulled Sale harder, his legs weak but unbroken. The storm howled, the guardians fought, the raiders hunted. But still he climbed, step after painful step. Sale looked at him, her face pale, her voice breaking. Why do you keep fighting?" He gasped for breath, his chest burning. "Because someone has to," he answered, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. Her eyes glistened, and for the first time since he found her, she let herself believe they might survive. But behind them, the leader mounted his hover bike, his army regrouping. The battle was not finished, it was only beginning. The mountains roared with fire and thunder. Guardians clashed with raiders, stone and metal shattering under the storm of battle. Snow burned black where energy blasts struck, the air thick with smoke and screams. And still, Aaron pulled Sale higher along the narrow path, his body trembling, his lungs burning. Behind them, the leader's hoverbike screamed through the storm, red lights cutting across the cliffs as he closed the distance. "Human, the leader's voice thundered. You cannot escape me. His words echoed like doom, carrying over the chaos of battle. Aaron stumbled, nearly falling, but Sail caught his arm. Though weak, she pulled with all the strength she had left. For the first time, she was helping him climb, not the other way around. Their breaths came in ragged bursts, but their eyes stayed locked on the peak ahead. If they could reach it, maybe, just maybe, they would live. But fate was cruel. The leader's bike cut in front of them, blocking the narrow trail. Snow sprayed into the air as he dismounted, his massive blade glowing red with fury. His army fought below, but he had chosen his prey, the boy and the alien girl. Aaron pushed Sail behind him, raising his stick once more. His arms shook, his knees buckled, but his eyes did not waver. The leader sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. You are no warrior, no soldier, not even a man. He raised his blade high. You are nothing, and nothing dies here. Sail cried out, her voice sharp with fear. No, she shouted, her hands glowing with blue light. But her body was too weak. The spark flickered and dimmed. The leader laughed, stepping closer. Your power is mine, girl, and your protector, your foolish human, will die first. Aaron's heart pounded like a drum, but he did not move back. He tightened his grip on the stick. I am not nothing, he said quietly, but his voice cut through the storm. I am human. The leader roared and swung his blade. The world seemed to slow, snow hanging in the air like frozen time. Aaron raised his stick, knowing it could not stop steel and fire. But then, something happened. The ground beneath them glowed with blue cracks. The mountain itself shuddered, answering the boy's defiance. From deep below, the last guardian rose, larger than all the others, its form towering against the sky. Its massive hand burst through the cliff, striking between Aaron and the leader. The shockwave sent snow and stone flying in all directions. The leader stumbled back, his blade sparking against the guardian's armor. He snarled in rage. Even stone cannot protect you forever. But the guardian's glowing eyes fixed on him. Its voice, deep as the earth, rumbled through the air. No harm, to the chosen. Aaron gasped, realizing it was protecting not just Sail, but him as well. His defiance had bound him to their ancient vow. The leader roared and struck again, but the guardian's arms swept forward. The impact sent the raider flying, crashing against the rocks below. His scream echoed before silence swallowed it. The battlefield below fell quiet. The raiders saw their leader broken, their courage shattered. One by one, they turned their bikes, retreating into the storm, their cries fading into the distance. The guardians stood tall, their glowing eyes watching until the last raider vanished. Then, slowly, like statues returning to sleep, they sank back into the mountain. Snow covered the cracks, silence returning to the peaks. Aaron dropped his stick, his small body collapsing to his knees. Sail rushed to him, holding his shoulders, tears in her silver eyes. You saved me, she whispered, her voice trembling. Aaron shook his head weakly. No, we saved each other. For a long moment, they sat together in the snow, the storm quiet around them. Sail touched his cheek gently, her eyes glowing softly. You are only a boy, but you are more than any warrior I have ever known. Aaron looked at her, his face pale but steady. I just didn't want to be alone anymore. Her lips curved into a fragile smile, her tears shining like stars. You are not alone now, she whispered. The mountain lay still, its secrets buried again. But something had changed forever. One lonely boy had stood against 30 raiders, had refused to break. And in doing so, he had awakened power older than time. As the wind carried their breath into the night sky, Sail looked toward the horizon, her voice soft but full of certainty. This is not the end, they will come again. Aaron stood slowly, his tired frame silhouetted against the pale dawn. Then we'll be ready, he said, his eyes fierce. For the first time in his life, he felt more than survival. He felt purpose. And somewhere deep in the mountains, the guardians waited. Silent, patient, eternal, ready to rise again when humanity stood unbroken.